94.3 The Dude is very grateful to our men and women in uniform. We're proud to recognize local members of our military by turning the spotlight on them right now in our Soldier Salute.
I'm your host, Sergeant First Class Retired Don Sorensen, and on today's Soldier Salute, I've got a very special guest. I have U.S. Army veteran and Doctor of Psychiatry with Moncrief Army Health Clinic, Dr. Rachel Nelson. Dr. Nelson, tell me about yourself.
Well, thank you. Good morning. I attended medical school at the University of Iowa and did my residency and fellowship in psychiatry at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, and was the chief of outpatient psychiatry at Fort Jackson when I served there until 2000. Following that, I did private practice, worked at the VA Medical Center in Columbia, and I've been at the Department of Psychiatry at Moncrief since 2010.
And Dr. Nelson, you actually received your medical training under the Army's AMED program. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes, it was a great program. It's a scholarship program where the Army will pay for your medical school, and after you graduate from medical school, you're a captain and do your residency and fellowship in the military. And then after you're finished with that, you have 4 years of quote-unquote payback time, which was being the chief of outpatient psychiatry at Fort Jackson.
Dr. Nelson, what I love is that you're treating soldiers and you've worn the uniform yourself. So I really think that your experiences lend so much more to your understanding than others. And thank you so much for, after having served, come back to continue to serve soldiers. I think that is just magnificent. How did you decide to become a doctor of psychiatry?
Well, that's a good question. In medical school, everybody rotates through the same areas, and I ultimately decided on psychiatry because it struck me that even if physically somebody is perfectly fine, they're really plagued with anxiety and depression, sleeping problems. Not only does it affect their lives, but the lives of everybody around them. And likewise, once treated, the exponential effect that you see of improving lives is just tremendous. And again, I chose psychiatry because I can see daily lives being changed and people having a higher quality of life. People have had a bad experience with behavioral health in the past. Don't give up. You'll find a place that works for you.
Dr. Nelson, what are some of the more common signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder or even traumatic brain injury, things that may have caused behavioral changes in someone's soldier?
Well, I'd say probably the number one thing that we see is disturbed sleep, sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, nightmares, and then getting dysregulated as far as having difficulty keeping a structured schedule, making commitments and not following through on those commitments, seeming distant and disengaged, and not enjoying and doing the things that they used to enjoy and do even when they have time to do them.
I think that a lot of those symptoms contribute to the high divorce rate maybe that we see in the military. Are there ways that spouses or family members can get help as well to help them cope with some of the changes in their soldier?
Yes, absolutely. I would encourage spouses and family members to try to go with the veteran to all of their medical appointments so they can be part of the care. And then oftentimes that gives them an opportunity to let the provider know what they're seeing, what they're concerned about. Because so often the veteran will minimize or not recognize the symptoms, but the spouse will.
If one type of therapy is not working for one soldier, they shouldn't just give up, should they?
Oh, absolutely not. Probably the biggest barrier that people have to seeking treatment is that they've had some treatment in the past that wasn't helpful, or maybe they had a provider that they felt like they didn't connect with, and so they believe that treatment won't help. Medication is oftentimes a small part of it, but then there's cognitive behavioral therapy, yoga, exercise, just looking at the whole person and brain health. And so there's not a one-size-fits-all.
I know when I first got out of uniform, all of a sudden it's like I didn't really have a purpose anymore. Do you think that might have something to do with what our soldiers are going through, just needing someone to take care of?
Oh, that I couldn't have said it better. That's the number one thing that I see is just people getting out and all of a sudden feeling like they don't have an identity, a purpose, a group, a tribe, and reestablishing something that is meaningful is quite difficult. So that's absolutely what we try to do, is get people to develop a new purpose.
What are some of the more successful ways that veterans or soldiers have to find that purpose again?
I think the first thing, if possible, and it seems a little counterintuitive, but for people to adopt a structured schedule, so they get up at a certain time, they eat at a certain time, and just getting their whole body regulated again, and then having just doable small goals like getting up and, leaving the house on a daily basis, even if it's to go to get gas. Just do something where they interact with another person. Having an animal is giant because the dogs, they will pull the veteran into the here and now, and so oftentimes veterans get lost in the past, or they're worrying about the future and they're just missing the time that's in the present.
Dr. Nelson, I've noticed that it's like the Army builds us up. They make us strong. They make us to where it's like we believe that picking up our problems and running with them is sometimes the way to cope with them. And sometimes it's just to, destroy those problems. But no one ever teaches us that it's okay to hold your hand up and ask for help. How do we get past that?
Well, I think it starts by, for those people out there that have gotten help, for them whenever possible to let others know that they were helped. So many of the times the people that come to me, they'll say, well, I would never have been here if it wasn't for, and then they'll name the person that prodded them and say, hey, you don't have to go, just go see her, she helped me. And that usually is what gets people into the idea that it's okay. Reading that it's okay is one thing, but if somebody you respect and admire that's also served tells you it's okay and tells you to go, that seems to really make a big difference.
Guys, if you're out there, if you're listening to this show, man, that's the first step. None of us that have ever worn a pair of combat boots are going to feel like you're weak for asking for help. I cannot imagine the strength that it must take to reach out. Can you tell me what kind of inner fortitude do you have to brace up to be able to make those strides forward?
It takes a tremendous amount of strength and trust that the people that you tell aren't going to laugh at you or they're not going to dismiss what you say. It takes the ultimate strength and I think the ultimate commitment that even though at the moment you feel hopeless, that somehow, somewhere there's a purpose out there, something that you're still needed on this planet, and you're going to persevere.
Dr. Nelson, one of the things about this area, and I might be way off in left field here, but if we've got guys out there that were National Guard or Reserve, or they were out for a number of years before they decided to seek perhaps, a behavioral health specialist or a psychiatrist. Are there things that doctors of psychiatry that have never dealt with the military, are there symptoms that they might miss? If there's a doctor out there listening right now, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, I would say that what they might miss is what the veteran isn't telling them. So, I think that oftentimes when people are suffering, they're somewhat private about their symptoms. They often feel a sense of shame and guilt about how they're feeling, and they feel weak. So they will oftentimes present and really minimize the symptoms that they're having and the suffering that they're having. So I would just encourage the providers to really ask some probing questions and to not give up. And if somebody says they're doing fine, but they're not looking fine, to keep an eye out and to establish that rapport, to try to win over the trust of the veteran, because it's only when they trust the provider that they're going to really tell them what's going on.
Dr. Nelson, I wish I had all week to talk to you because there are so many things and so many veterans out there that I think need help. What advice do you have? Is there a website they can go to or a phone number? What's the first step they take in seeking out help?
Well, probably the fastest is that if they do have a primary care provider, to speak with that provider or the nurse on that team and to ask for a referral to see a behavioral health specialist. Other things that they can do is there's Military One Source is usually a good place to start. It's a 1-800 number, 342-9647, and they will help people get hooked up to resources. And then if they are a TRICARE recipient, they can go to Humana Medical online. They have 24/7 chat room and 1-800 numbers there with Humana that they can link people up to care sources. Also, just for everybody to know, the suicide prevention hotline is always available, and that's 1-800-273-8255. Unfortunately, sometimes people feel so much that they don't have a purpose and they're not needed anymore that they will start to feel like nobody would notice if they weren't here. fear. If we can get people through that period, it's usually a transient feeling, but if they act on it with lethal means, then we lose them. So just really important for people to recognize that it's not hopeless and there are people out there that want to help.
Dr. Nelson, thank you so much for coming in and being on the Soldier Salute today.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us in our Soldier Salute, presented by Little Pigs Barbecue. Serving Columbia since 1963 with that bodacious buffet. By Lexington Guns and Shooting Range. Veteran owned and operated. By Carolina Honda Powerhouse. Motorcycles, ATVs, and side-by-sides with discounts for all military personnel. And Dominion Energy. We depend on